On today's show, we'll be talking about the role of art in our lives. Now, I'm not talking about painting or singing or writing. I'm talking about how we give more meaning to our lives. And if you're reading the latest, you know that it turns out that having a purpose in life, coming from that meaning, is one of the strongest forces for living a longer life. So stay tuned. Small actions create compounding impact, can really change things. Your hitting subscribe is one of those small actions. It tells the algorithm this show matters. That helps us to reach more people and lets us bring you more solid information to support you in your work and life. So if this episode gave you something, this is one way that you can give back. And we'll keep showing up to return the favor. And if you watch or listen to me on another platform and want to gain access to exclusive publications from my guests and special editions from me, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Madeline Blair. Have you ever met someone, admired for their career success, and discovered that their real passion was driving a race car? I remember being floored when a successful executive ended our conversation about business efficiently so that we had maybe 20 minutes to just sort of get to know each other a bit more. He then told me about his absolute passion for race cars, driving them, watching races, participating in any way that he could. But I also noticed, as he talked, his whole face lit up. I felt honored that he would share with me something of such value to him. Now, you're probably thinking that race cars aren't art, but to him, they were. I wish I could remember the words he used as he described a race. I mean, he spoke of the rhythm, he spoke of the dance of the crew as they changed tires. Just thinking about this, I'm actually considering how I might arrange to go to a race and see it, if I too could see the beauty that he sees. I know I'll have to use, those big reduction things for my ears, but that might be a small inconvenience to see if I could see what he sees. I'm not going to say that racing cars are art, but then again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Now today, I'd like to introduce and talk with a person who works in knowledge management during the week and does it with great effectiveness. But when we talk, it is almost always about her art. Barbara Bitondo designs knowledge solutions in the international development arena and creates art that explores how we connect to people, places, and experience. Based in Washington, D.C., she draws on her life lived across Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. Her artistic practice focuses on paper, fiber, and textiles, combining traditional techniques with experimentation to create layered sculptural works. Through both her professional and creative pursuits, Barbara explores and often dissolves boundaries across landscapes of knowledge where ideas, memories, and cultural connections are gathered, shaped, and shared across time and place. She has a site-specific installation in the lobby of the International Finance Corporation headquarters here in Washington, D.C., and an upcoming solo show at the Whitmore House, also in Washington, D.C., and I think that's in September. Well, all right, I'm going to bring Barbara on. Barbara, welcome to Unlocked.
Oh, Madeline, thank you for having me.
I have followed Barbara's work for almost 40 years. I've watched her become more and more original in her creations. Or perhaps I should say that your creations are becoming more and more you. Anyway, welcome. Many people explore art from the perspective of wishing to see what the artist is saying, what are the techniques used, what was happening at the time, in that period of art. I think I could go on with lots of reasons why people take time to look at artworks, but I'm going to guess that you look at art to learn techniques regardless of age or medium, so that you can be inspired to bring those ideas into your own, not necessarily directly, but simply being informed by them. At what time in your life did you discover your interest in art? And I'm going to say passion as well.
Well, art has always been a source of personal enjoyment and inspiration for me. I don't remember a moment when I started. I don't even remember the first museum or art piece I made. But I do remember understanding that art was personal when I was about 6. My father presented me with 2 framed small scale reproductions of modern painting. There was an O'Keeffe and a Manet florals. But what made them special at that moment was that I knew that he picked them for me. They were unlike anything in his collection, and they were unlike anything I had personally seen before. But when he presented them to me, I understood in that moment that art is highly individual, and that as you know somebody, you know a little bit about their art life, even when they're young. And I think that that moment sparked an independent relationship with art that has stayed with me ever since.
That story is really striking. The fact that he took the time to think about what his daughter would like or might like, really zeroing in on that. Because, that, as I said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And yeah, there has to be a connection.
Yes, it was a very special moment, and of course, I had my own art that was framed in my bedroom as a young person, always. But it was that notion that he would go into the world and pull something just for me. Of course, reproductions are ubiquitous now, but when I was a young person, we pulled them out of magazines. They weren't
Yes.
something that you ordered online. So it was really a special something that my father went out and brought home for me.
Yeah. Well, the reason that we're having this conversation is because you shared with me a catalog of American female artists who you felt made singular contributions to the art world. Tell that story because it's such a great story.
Well, I'm going to just correct it a little bit. In honor of America's 250, almost every museum in the United States and France is doing something about this special anniversary and the anniversary of the American Revolution, from kind of lists of important artworks or artifacts or documents in a collection, etc., from the period. And I came across one such list in a major newspaper where they had said, here's a list of 15 artworks that we think really speak to America's 250. And I looked at the list and I discovered some artists I didn't know. I saw some pictures that I haven't thought about in a long time. And something was sitting with me after that, and I couldn't figure out what it was, Madeline. And it dawned on me that there wasn't a single woman whose art was represented. And, I'm not saying that we always have to have equal number of men and women and everything's got to be, 50-50. It struck me. And I said, well, who would I put on the list? I mean, I started right there. And
I have to interrupt you. It
yes.
would be like people listing all the great physicists and forgetting Marie Curie.
For example,
Yeah.
It didn't hit me right away. And I don't go looking at lists, for who's missing, but it did sit with me. And I discovered a couple things. One, it's not easy to capture through a handful of images the richness and complexity of the American experience as it celebrates its 250th anniversary. So, I gave the newspaper a lot of grace. However, failing to include a single female artist in a list of 15 works in a major newspaper really just got into my psyche. And I started with a quick back of the envelope list of the artists who sprang to mind.
Yeah.
And one of their works, I didn't even try to connect it with America 250. I was more thinking, well, who could it be? Well, okay, Georgia O'Keeffe comes to mind. Mary Cassatt, maybe. So it was like that.
Mm-hmm.
As I refined the list, I realized that my collection needed to reflect the nation as defined not only by founding ideals, but also by landscape, aspirations, contradictions, and our ongoing pursuit of, a more perfect union. And so my list, which I'll be happy to share with you again, includes America's story of achievement and unfinished work, as presented, by female artists in particular. And I also wanted to capture expanding opportunities that have come over the years through our nation's, journey, including struggles for equality, recognition, and justice. So my list took really 2 iterations, a quick one and then a more thoughtful one that was, again, an intellectually challenging exercise that really asked me to think and dig deep in my understanding of what it takes to curate and offer a collection.
Yeah. What I'm thinking is, if you're willing, we can take your list and I can post it on my YouTube channel in the show notes.
I'd love that.
Okay, good. Well, my next question was what factors guided you, but I think you may have covered that. But just check and see if there's anything else, because sometimes, as I thought about now, who would I pick? And of course, Georgia O'Keeffe was the absolute first image that came to my mind. But were there other things that really said this person has got to be on the list?
Well, yes. I went through, I started with a list of artists, and I knew immediately that I was going to be limited with the heuristic of, for example, availability. So I wanted to make sure that I was going beyond just the names of the artists I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I made a quick list of ideas. So the idea of aspiration and dream that is part of the immigrant experience, the importance of labor by so many over our history, and what has come with that. Another topic that came to me was space and exploration. So, Manifest Destiny shows up on a lot of American artistic lists as a theme, but, space, especially in the last century, has been an important aspect of American experience and, what our story is about. So I wanted to make sure there was something around space.
Okay.
You can't really talk about the United States and not talk about justice and equity, slavery and emancipation. So I went looking for examples for those topics. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to make sure that, when we think of American art, sometimes we think of Andy Warhol and his icons. And so I thought, well, Amy Sherald turned Michelle Obama into an icon. And that icon is an important image that represents many layers of our history with race in the United States. So that is a little bit about how my list came together.
As usual, always a thorough analysis for you. Well, one of the things actually that I admire about you is how you do your art. It's the ability to dive so deeply into every aspect of the piece, the material, the medium, the intention, the style. What we're shifting now to your art. What drives you to look so deeply?
Well, in some ways, Madeline, it's the same approach that I took to making this list. It was curiosity. You know, I saw the list in the newspaper and I thought, well, what I think I could do better. What can I do? Let's see what I can do. It was curiosity. Like, who do I know?
Yeah.
And in my art practice, it's also curiosity that is the driver. My hands really do lead the way. I choose materials based on what I have on hand, what I like the idea of working with, and also the destination of the piece. So, does it have to be a large piece? Is this, a collection that they want, or is this, for the wall or for the middle of the room? And I also enjoy setting limits of time and technical challenges for myself. So again, materials are not passive. Paper, fiber, thread, pigment, they all carry power, provenance, possibility. And in my practice, I like to see what they can do, and what they can mean as I work with them. And again, like with that list I created, the deeper I look, the more connections I find.
And I love the fact that you use the word constraint, because you know I have often worked with teams who say, well, they have too many constraints. No. The constraints actually allow you to be even more creative because you've got to work within that. And I think sometimes you do that, as I see how you work with medium. You you stretch it to things that I would never have imagined. So, and one of the things you actually talk about in your practice is that you dissolve boundaries. Talk a little bit about what that means and how physically, how do you make that happen?
Oh gosh, that's a great question, Madeline. Dissolving boundaries. When I speak of this or when I think about it, I'm I find myself constantly moving between categories that are often kept separate, like art and craft, painting, sculpture, surface, structure. Um, and in my hands, what that looks like is making my paper behave like cloth. My fiber becomes a drawing line, or a woven form expanding into a sculptural space. I'm interested in the moments when a material stops being what we expect and becomes something new. I love it when, I send a piece to a show and I get an email when they receive it saying, "Oh my gosh, I know that you said it was paper, but in the picture it looks like it's ceramic. And then when it arrived, it didn't weigh anything." And I'm really, you know, astonished. I mean, this is what I mean by dissolving boundaries. It's this working in the space of transformation where work really does come alive for me.
Oh, great. Well, I'm going to challenge you now to this is what you do in your passion area, but you also work. I mean, you work in knowledge. You use that same process.
I do. Um, so usually, knowledge management means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and I don't even like the term. I prefer knowledge elicitation or knowledge transfer or knowledge networks. Speaks more to me. But it mirrors a little bit my work in the studio, the way I deal with knowledge challenges. Usually, people come, teams or leadership come with a challenge. People aren't using knowledge that's available to make decisions as efficiently or as carefully as they need to, for example, or uh, teams are not as forthcoming with information and what can we do to unlock that information, knowledge, etc., to help others work better, faster, cheaper, whatever the challenge is. And so for me, I try to think not of people and information and technology, but I like to think about possibility and uh, what if time stretched or constricted, and what would that do to the efficiency, and how can we explore that the same way that I work with fabric and paper and making paper pulp and painting with it. Really just looking to see what is possible when we stop looking and treating our materials and resources the way we always have.
I have to tell you, I had an incredible image in my mind as you talked about knowledge and the the boundary thing. What I have seen, or what I saw in my mind, was people and knowledge. And of course, we always tend to think of them as two objects. And suddenly they blurred. I literally blurred together. I mean, going back to your thing about time, it was as if they'd swooshed together. So that was the image that I saw. And I just wanted to share that with you. Because to me, knowledge, of course, is all about using it. It's, you're right. It's acquisition. It's sharing. It's transfer. Yeah. All right. Well, I know you put a lot of thought and design into crafting what you call art days. At a single museum or an art district in the region or an art trip to a city somewhere else. And that often you work around a theme or design a trip around a special place of artistic and cultural value. First of all, I'd like you to talk about why you choose to find a day, set a day aside to actually do an art day. And how do you design that?
Well, this is a great question. Now, the first thing I want to say is I believe that it was Julia Cameron who came up with the term art date. And she has a specific idea of this. It comes from her artist way. And I believe it's 2 hours on your own by yourself, like this. And I do what I call art days, where I usually book the calendar. I book myself unavailable, usually on a weekday when I'm not at the office or working. And I think in advance of how I'm going to spend that day. It usually, like I think I mentioned to you and you mentioned, I choose a theme or a destination or something of artistic or cultural value or research that I'm doing for a particular project. And then I kind of think through what I might like to build onto it. So sometimes I'll look at several artists who worked in a particular time period or at a particular place. Mm-hmm. Or I'll go look at a diverse array of different works in a museum that all use the same material at different times in history. Sometimes I will make a trip to go see an exhibition that is very culturally focused. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it means just one museum, or sometimes it looks like spending a few hours with a few small works. So I reach out to the museum ahead and I say, I'm coming. I'd like to see these 6 or 7 things that are not typically on view. Is there any way we can arrange that? Usually museums, once they understand why you want to see something, will be very accommodating.
I think that's something people don't understand. I also have done that, where I've called ahead and said, this is the project I'm working on. This is why I need to have this special access. And you're right. They're very accommodating.
So yeah, that's what an art day looks like. Sometimes I'll combine it with, a film at home watching myself that's related to it. Sometimes I will bring a friend who's also interested in the topic, because often, 2 people talking about a show mm-hmm. after they've seen it, kind of walk through it by themselves, is very interesting and thought-provoking. And then, sometimes I'll make my own self-guided exploration through a gallery, ahead. I find that artificial intelligence like Claude and Copilot really help me to add on nearby points of interest that relate to what I'm doing, surprisingly. And I find that when I schedule these days, and create space for discovery and surfacing connections, I'm just richer for the experience.
How did you use Claude? What was the prompt for that?
Okay, so for example, I recently took a trip to, I had to take my mother on a trip for a personal visit to one of her old friends, and we were going to a place that I'm unfamiliar with. And so I said, I used Copilot on that one, and I said, I'm going to this state. We're going to be staying in this place. I've got sort of 2 days to myself. I'll have a car. I'm interested in land art. I'm interested in, you know, getting to as many outdoor places as I can get to, but I don't want to spend too much time on the road. And, over the course of several days of refinement, I got a 4-day experience that wove together museums and historical places. I was in Arizona, and then also included several restaurants that I could bring the older set to. So it worked out quite well.
I would never have thought to ask Claude that. And yet, it's as you describe it, I'm thinking, well, of course you can do that because it has access to all that.
Yeah, and double check because, check and check again.
Yeah.
It gave me some recommendations that were very helpful and then missed out on a couple. And the host that was having us said, well, what about this? And that, was not on my list at all, on my radar at all. And other times, hours and opening hours and so on sometimes are not totally up to date. So you always want to check.
That's true. That's very true. You have the opportunity to, I'll even say the privilege to be able to travel around the world. What if someone doesn't have that? How might they engage in a real conscious exploration of, for example, cultural opportunities?
Oh my gosh, Madeline, there is nothing better than armchair traveling. During lockdown, when none of us could really travel physically, I began and have consciously developed an active practice of traveling through research online. My practice has continued and increased since the pandemic, kind of was put behind us. For example, this year I've been doing a deep dive on Frank Lloyd Wright, his philosophy, designs, and the way his influence is showing up around the world. So less about what he did here and more about how did visits by other architects to the United States in the 40s translate into changes in architecture back home where they went. This involves a lot of virtual tours. I use Google Maps. I use Google. Google has an art channel where you can go visit museums and buildings. And so many people do videos when they go and visit places. And I find that my research turns into a kind of journey. And I can visit buildings and as I'm reading something about an artist or an architect, I can go to YouTube and watch a little bit about whatever the topic is that has piqued my interest. And then when I finally do make it to the destination, if and when I do, I find that I'm so much more engaged. And yeah, it's whether I'm traveling for business or pleasure, it really does enrich my experience having, traveled virtually ahead.
I suspect that takes a little bit of organization.
Well, it does. I mean, I have themes. So, this year is a big Frank Lloyd Wright topic for me. So, when I went to Arizona, as I mentioned earlier, one of the places I visited was Taliesin West. Closer to home, falling water has been on my radar for a long time. And of course, I've seen still photos and I've looked at a lot of diagrams, building diagrams, and I've seen videos, but I do I keep lists and, I remind myself on Fridays to go back to my lists and see if there are any videos I want to watch. yeah, so it does, I do schedule these into my weekly plans.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So you haven't been to Falling Water yet?
I did. I just went finally after my entire life of wanting to go.
Yeah.
It was spectacular. I highly recommend it.
Yes, it has a feel in it that you can't get from a virtual exploration.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Even a very, deep dive digital,
right.
trip on the internet, you still can't get it.
Yeah, yeah. You just have to step into the first room and you go, oh.
Yeah.
It's, Wright believed that that people should never be more than 6 feet tall. And I can imagine some of our very, very, very tall individuals finding it very difficult to be in a Frank Lloyd Wright house. But for those of us who are less, find it to be very accommodating.
Well, for tall people, there is the joy of digital exploration.
That's right. That's right. Well, part of all of our learning, and you and I are very similar this way, we're constantly learning. We have a lifetime that we've been doing it and will continue to do it. Um, but part of that is, reading, listening, as you say, studying. Another part I call reflection. It's that time between when we think about what we've seen or heard or felt or tasted or smelled and let our amazing minds mix it all together and discover even more understanding. I can't imagine your in depth work that you don't do something to really help you develop those new insights from your work, your art, your life. Talk about that process.
I will. So if there's anything that I will always do is I will always find a partner or a small group to, hey, let's have a monthly, Zoom call and talk about what we're reading as it relates to textile art. Or, let's have a studio meeting where each one of us brings a piece of work and we take turns talking about our work and reflecting and asking questions. So definitely that's part of my reflection, is engaging other people.
Yeah.
However, I have found that reflection by myself is essential before any meeting. I like to write down what I'm thinking. I like to write down what I want to bring to a group. And the way I do this is by writing short essays for myself. I write short essays on anything and everything that captures my attention. These are not written for publication. I very rarely share them. They're my way of thinking on paper, and they're also the way that I get my thoughts together before a meeting like the one we're having now, or a book group or something like that. And what does it look like? Maybe a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with a friend of mine in Normandy, and it came up that Washington and Paris may not be sister cities, but they're sort of cousin cities. And I was trying to explain to my friend some of the characteristics, and I wasn't doing a great job. So when I got off the phone, I said, let me just start writing. So I wrote, a 2-page essay with a few of my own pictures to kind of, line up what I was thinking and why I would think that and why other people have written about this. It's a kind of life practice. Even ahead of this call, I, wrote a sort of an essay about, what is my art life practice? How is curiosity, observation, learning, making part of a weekly rhythm for me, and how does it look like? And so, yeah, this is what I do. It's not a journal entry. I mean, it's an essay in the true sense.
So it's just your exploration of the topic.
It is. It is. And I find that writing the things down and having a structure, a thesis, a title, references, just like we did in school, really helps me to determine what matters. What am I going to spend the time thinking about? And then also, again, online research and, going into my own files of photos and things. I often find that what I'm writing about is not, I'm not thinking about it for the first time, but I might be writing about it for the first time. And it really does become a bridge between my experience and my understanding.
Hmm. As you were talking, I was reminded of a group that I have met with for 25 years. It's called Madeline's Book Club. And we we get together once a month for about an hour. And you can talk about whatever you've been reading. So you don't even have to read a particular book. You just come and talk. And it's an amazing place to crystallize your thinking. And so we've been doing it for so long. Uh, you feel very comfortable saying whatever you need to say because it's not going to be critiqued, and you can change your mind in the middle of it. You're right. So that interaction is incredibly important in terms of uh, building understanding within yourself. Writing, of course, to me is a very powerful way to figure out
Well,
what I'm thinking.
yes, talk about your process. I'd be interested to hear, how do you do your reflection? Do you do it the same time every day? Do you have a special system? I'd love to know.
No, I don't do it a special time of the day. Although there is one practice I do at night where I make note of what I can remember that I did and some things that I want to do the next day. But that's not really a reflection in the way we've been talking about it. One of the areas where I do this the most is when I write a grounds for thought. I tend to be I tend to like to use time productively. And even though, as you describe it, I know it's productive, for me, I need to have a little bit more, um, I'll call it usefulness. And so I write grounds for thought. And it's been amazing what I have written for myself because I'm not a natural writer. I just never was. And this is a place where I can each week, maybe even twice a week, write something down and think about it. Yeah. The book club is more fun. It's more my style because it's spontaneous. People just
Mhm.
come in, and it's the interaction. In fact, social constructionists say that the knowledge doesn't sit in our heads; it actually exists in the conversation between us. And
Mm.
once you get that in your mind, and that goes back to that image that I saw of the head of the face merging with the knowledge. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for asking that question, though. It'll get me thinking about whether I could benefit from a more regular.
Well, I mean, you've written so many books, Madeline, that it would. I assumed that you had a routine or a way that you went about it.
No, I wish I did. Well, okay. Your art has really grown over the years. What's next for you?
Okay, well, yes, it's grown physically. I started working very small, and right now I'm very excited about two new series that are pushing my explorations of materials in different directions and at large scale. I'm still connected with the themes of transformation and layering. But on the one hand, I'm working on a large scale series, a large series of large scale printed textiles that will show in September at the Whitmore House. And these are combining printed imagery, fabric, layered surfaces that create pieces that I think move between textile, painting, and sculpture. They're going to be presented hanging against the wall, but they um, are very long and have potential for different presentations. I'm very interested presently on how printed and handmade elements can coexist and how layering can create both visual and emotional depth. So that's one. And at the same time, I'm developing a series of black paper sculptures for a second show in the fall that is more atmospheric and exploring shadow and form as opposed to luminosity and horizon. metal and metallic elements are playing more and more of an important role in my work. Both of these series feature metal metal in reflection or structure. I like the tension between fiber and paper and the permanence of metal. I think what's really also driving me is my ongoing interest in blurring the line between materials, disciplines, what we expect a material to be, what it can become. And I'm learning a lot about what you can do, for example, with metal. So that's kind of where things are right now.
Wow. And I have to tell your audience that one of the pieces, when she talks about large, she did one that was 30 feet long, wasn't it?
Yeah. I
Nothing.
like to work with vintage Japanese fabric. And Japanese fabric typically is about, I guess in inches, it would be 15 to 20 inches wide, and usually, 20 feet, but several, 20 meters long. This is kind of their bolts. And so that is one of the limiting factors that I find to be very liberating, actually. So that's where the width comes from, or the length. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. I'm going to ask you a more challenging question, I think. It's clear that you have a passion for what you do in terms of art. How do you bring that, the learnings, the excitement, how do you bring that into your work life?
That's a great question. I think the work that I do around knowledge and designing knowledge solutions is a very creative practice. There's no one solution that works for every challenge. And there's a lot of looking at other solutions that other people are doing, or as technology emerges, what becomes possible, and doing a lot of prototyping or proofs of concept, or even just a trial. Let's try this thing. Let's do a pilot. That is endlessly creative. I am often the person who's called in to, we did a vanilla flavored solution and we're not so happy with it. Can you, do something with it and make it a little, more dynamic? I mean, I'm often part of a cleanup crew or a, embellishment
A refinement crew.
So yeah, there's a lot of creativity there. And it goes the other way too. I'm not a graphic designer. I design solutions related to knowledge flows and knowledge elicitation. But my thinking is very visual, and I'm usually thinking with a pencil. And so, we go to a meeting and there's a lot of talk. And of course, we're capturing the meeting on Zoom and getting transcriptions. So there's no loss of the meat. But, I'm drawing arrows and circles, and, what comes out of the meeting for me is often an abstract painting. And I have used these abstractions in my art. So it goes both ways.
Ah, lovely. All right. This is my last question, but it's a really important one. I'm truly curious of what you might tell a young person. Perhaps they're just starting out in their career, about, the value of art to them. And perhaps maybe someone who didn't have you as an inspiration when they were young, they might find that in their 50s, they're ready to think about this. What would you tell them?
Okay. Whether you're starting out or beginning again later in life, my advice is the same. Follow your fancy. Pay attention to what sparks your curiosity, what causes you to linger, what keeps returning to your thoughts. Don't worry about whether it's practical, whether you're good at it, whether it's trending, whether anybody is doing it, where it might take you. Just follow it. That's how life, and especially a creative life, unfolds in my experience. One interest leads to another. A museum visit becomes a book. A book that you read becomes a trip that you take. A trip becomes an essay. An essay becomes a work of art. A work of art becomes a conversation. And then over time, these seemingly unrelated pursuits create, I think, a richer and more meaningful life, an art life. I've learned that passions are rarely random. Passions and jealousy, too, are clues. And if you follow your fancy, no matter how old you are, I believe that it knows something that you don't know yet.
Oh, that's beautiful advice. And I love that you use the word fancy and not what you love, because sometimes it has to grow to that.
There was a time when I read an enormous amount. When I was in my 20s, I was in 4 book groups. I was reading copious amounts of literature and nonfiction. And then I don't know what happened. The book groups dissolved. I moved and I wasn't reading as much. And I did other artistic pursuits. And at a certain point, I realized that I just wasn't reading. I was doing a lot, but I wasn't reading. And I said, well, I want to develop a reading practice. And I found that it was hard to do that unless I just let myself read whatever I wanted. And so I started keeping a list. If it had a cover, I could mark it as a read, whether it was long or short, or a children's book or a cookbook or whatever it was. And giving myself permission in the reading category really opened up doors for me in other categories. And so that's what I mean by follow your fancy. Just,
Fabulous.
It's private matter. Just no judgment.
Barbara Bitondo, thank you.
Oh, Madeline, thank you.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. In this Grounds for Thought, I'd like to explore how others looked at the world with passion. They used what they saw to create new things. And I must begin with Twyla Tharp, the author of the book, The Creative Habit. She had a particular way of saving things that she then used in choreographing a new dance. She called it a box. She says in her book, the box is not a substitute for creating. The box doesn't compose or write a poem or create a dance step. The box is the raw index of our preparation. It is the repository of your creative potential. I have to say that again because it's so powerful. It is the repository of your creative potential. Her boxes are filled with things that come to her mind, cross her path, remind her of a conversation, inspire her. They might be say a CD or an article of clothing, all kinds of things. The box, by the way, is real. And for one of her dances, she filled up 12 boxes. As she describes her process, she said, the quality of the creative output is also a function of how diligent and clever I've been in filling up my boxes. As I read this, I could see her looking at the world with an open mind as well as open eyes. She captures things and puts them in a box so that it serves as her memory. Liz Lamoureux wrote Inner Excavations. Explore yourself through photography, poetry, and mixed media. This book reminds me of Tharp's way of gathering things together to nurture creativity. Lamoureux is about gathering things together to nurture a greater understanding of who you are. She's not doing the collection herself, but she knows that if you do it, the benefits will happen. Why include her here? Because knowing who you are also boosts your creativity. It does other things. But that link between knowing who you are and creativity is real, even as it is surprising. In Lamoureux's book, she encourages going out, seeing the world, and bringing back photographs, poetry, and mixed media. Writing notes about what you are seeing and gathering is tucked in as well. Sounds a lot like what Barbara was just talking about. Are you seeing the arc now of observation, memory, and reflection yet? And then there's Anne Morrow Lindbergh in Gifts from the Sea. Written while spending time at a beach house, the convenience of finding shells that offer prompts for reflection allows her creative writing the opportunity to not only share, but to present her thoughts with a metaphor to give structure and relatability to them. There they are again, just maybe in a little different order. Reflection on memories, yet using observation as a prompt. We may not all be artists, but we can all be creative. Our challenge in life is to nurture that creativity. Each of these authors spends time observing their world, whether it is episodic, as Tharp, purposeful, as Lamoureux, or purely accidental, as Lindbergh. They each capture what stimulates them and draws from them as they create a dance, a sense of identity, or the exploration of an idea. Observation, memory, reflection. But does this all relate to leadership? Helping individuals apply their best talents and skills together with others to achieve a common mission or goal is what every leader desires. We use annual performance evaluations to help staff see where they are in relation to the overriding objective. But can leaders see all that matters? Only if they look. Observing staff behavior is the first step. Observing the factors in play is the second. Are staff employing the skills you hired them for? Are they bringing them to the task with energy or obligation? Are they bringing their best? Relying on memory alone in the busyness of the work often loses the detail that supplies the necessary understanding to create solutions. Make notes and put your notes in a box if it helps, and do it at the time. When it comes time to create that performance review, you now have more data to understand the numbers, and that detail helps staff understand what they need to do as well. Okay, you aren't choreographing a dance, but you are still choreographing. A good performance review is a thing of beauty. You see, you can be an artist. Leadership is an art when it begins with an observant mind and one that is willing to reflect on what has been learned. As a first step, try to observe the nonverbal communication that occurs in a meeting. And don't forget to take notes afterward of something that surprised you. So where's that box? I want to thank you for joining me today, and I hope this conversation has offered not just new ideas, but a different way of observing the world, one that supports creating valuable options for your work and your business. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.